I'm now delighted to be joined online by Dan Southworth in the next of our Mortal Kombat Legacy franchise documentary. Dan, who played the character Kenshi in the Mortal Kombat Legacy series. And I suppose, Dan, we've spoken to an awful lot of the cast so far from Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and Mortal Kombat Legacy. And what I was saying to them, Mortal Kombat, the franchise, is growing and growing at an accelerating rate. It's almost like the James Bond series now, in terms of its success. And once you're part of that family, that alumni, you're always sort of part of it. And you played the character Kenshi. Kenshi didn't appear in the Mortal Kombat movie or Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So as people will know, you've been the one and only Kenshi. You're the only person to play Kenshi so far in Mortal Kombat. And what was that experience like for you, and how happy are you to be associated with Mortal Kombat?
That was a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed playing the character Kenshi. I grew up watching the Zatoichi movies directed by Kurosawa, and Zatoichi is a favorite. He's a blind swordsman, and if you're not for Zatoichi, and so getting a chance to play Kenshi was probably as close as I could come to being the blind swordsman myself, in that respect. So it was something of a close to a dream to be able to play. Also, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the character. Kevin Tantrum, the director of the show that I did, allowed me a lot of room to be creative as the character. And I was able to have fun and give him a little bit of personality before his marked change as he becomes the blind swordsman, and have him a little bit of an arrogant, sort of snarky, sarcastic character. Which was a lot of fun.
I suppose, Dan, we all know you have an extensive martial arts background, the martial arts history. In terms of the Kenshi character, did they come to you in terms of that character? Or did particularly you had in mind, or did you have to go through numerous? I don't think you probably had to go through numerous auditions for the Kenshi character. I suppose Mortal Kombat. All the movies so far, a big thing is the martial arts and the martial arts background. And were you sought out for the Kenshi role, or did your agent tell you about it?
I usually have to audition for all of my roles. I'm not such a big actor or name or star power that I can get around that. But in this particular case, they came to me. It was very nice. I was recommended to the director. I mean, I'm not sure he had heard of me. I don't go around supposing that people have heard of me. So I think somebody recommended my name to him, and he made me an offer. And he looked me up, or perhaps he did know of me, that I don't know. And they made me a direct offer for the role. It was a web series. It was a modified union contract. So it wasn't like it was a giant deal of a role in terms of monetary compensation or even career changing, but it was a really fun role to play. And those are the things I look for, and a chance to grow outside the normal bounds of action sword wielding heroes that I normally play.
Yeah, and I suppose, Dan, the Kenshi himself, I suppose, the iconic sort of fight scene that you had there with Ermac, and just in relation to that, I suppose the shooting of that, did that take a week, maybe 2 weeks? I suppose it has to be shot from so many different angles, and there's so many moves and choreography in that sort of thing. Where was that actual location of that fight take place? Was it outside, an outdoor location? And how long did it take to get everything?
That location took place in Malibu Canyon Creek Park, where the original MASH television series was filmed. It's a beautiful park. That fight scene only took us half a day to shoot. We rehearsed a few times before then. The gentleman who played Ermac, his name is Kim Do, a very accomplished martial artist in his own right, and wonderful guy to work with, one of my favorite guys to work with in terms of action designers who create choreography, and it was easy for us to execute because we were both very good at that particular kind of performance. So when you're working with another professional like that, it can be a lot of fun. I mean, there's no ego between guys like us. We know exactly what it takes. We collaborate and help each other look as good as we can. And that's what makes it fun. You can focus on the character. And one thing that's great about Kim Do is that he builds character moments into his choreography, much like I used to when I worked for one of Jackie Chan's choreographers. I used to apprentice with one of his choreographers for 7 years. And that's when choreography really takes on character and gets exciting, when you're thinking about it and approaching it in terms of telling a story and creating character moments, not just putting in flips and jump kicks and chops and sword slashes for the sake of it.
And I suppose, Dan, in terms of that fight scene, in terms of Ermac, we all know that Ermac has special abilities, and in terms of that had to be obviously special effects had to be brought into that. I suppose you're choreographing that sort of fight scene with the character that played Ermac. You don't actually see the sort of finished article right away. When you first saw it back on TV screen, or you saw it back, what was your initial reaction? Were you sort of taken back by it all, how it looked on screen?
We used practical effects, so real hair and makeup effects for Kim Do to actually look like Ermac. But the tentacles and some of the mystic light rays that come out of my hands, of course, that was CGI. But by then I'd been used to it, and you never know what it's going to look like. I think I'm always pleasantly surprised when it doesn't take me out of my suspension of disbelief after seeing it. It didn't do that in this case. It worked for the scene just fine.
Yeah, and I suppose, Dan, in terms of Mortal Kombat Legacy, as you mentioned, it was a web series. It was very sort of popular. Did you see the potential there for future sorts of seasons? I suppose in terms, we all see with the development of Netflix how these series have been picked up and ran for future seasons. Do you think maybe in Mortal Kombat Legacy they were trying to get to the conclusion that bit too quick? They could have stretched it out for another sort of season 2, because it had a massive appeal and a sort of massive sort of audience.
Yeah, that show came out during the forming of all of these platforms. I mean, I don't think they have been completely established yet the way they are now. I think if that show would have been produced at this point in time, at this moment in time, it may have found its way onto Netflix, possibly for some more seasons. At the time, Warner Brothers, I had just finished producing my own web series. And even then, we were a little too late because we were a smaller production. And sometimes when you're a smaller production, you kind of want to get it out there first. Because when the giant Goliaths come in and put in all the money that they have behind them, they can outshine you. And at that moment, what Warner Brothers was doing in conjunction with Machinima, with Mortal Kombat Legacy Season 2, they put $1 million into that web series, which isn't a lot in terms of what they spend on normal shows, but it was a lot of money spent for a web series at the time. And it came out great. It came out fantastic. I don't see why it wouldn't have been able to go on to become a really popular series if they tried to bring it back to Netflix or another streaming network. But who knows what the numbers are that came in, what the magic plot points along the graph that need to be hit for the giant corporations that put their money into this are in order for them to give the green light for more seasons. You know, I said plot points, but I meant data points.
And I suppose that Yeah, I suppose, Dan, there's great anticipation and excitement out there. The trailers are just hitting all over YouTube at the moment about the new Mortal Kombat movie out in
Hmm.
2021 in January. I suppose it's been 20 years since the last Mortal Kombat movie. Since the games released in 2016 or 2017, bestsellers worldwide. The comic book franchise is going through the roof. I suppose with the special effects that they have now in the 21st century, and I suppose with the people more into line that they can go a bit more X-rated in what they can do in terms of the fight scenes and stuff like that, back to where it was back in 1996 to 97. I suppose there's great anticipation and excitement for Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, it depends on what venue they plan to release it on. I mean, they can't quite go as extreme as the video games go. I suspect if they want to do a worldwide release in theaters or even on Netflix or a comparable streaming platform. But of course, the special effects are going to be much better. I actually auditioned for one of the main characters in the show. It was a really well written audition. I
Okay.
was uh, I was surprised to see that. I heard it was coming out, and I was thinking to myself, "Oh, okay, here we go, another Mortal Kombat movie." But when I read the piece, I was uh, I was pleased by the story they were telling, and it's too bad I didn't make the final selection, but I enjoyed the audition quite a bit. I got a chance to be that character, even if it was just for 5 minutes in front of two casting directors.
I suppose, Dan, you have some of the background knowledge, so I'm not going to ask you about that. But in case the producers ran back to you in a week's time and say, "Listen, we have a cameo role for Kenshi in the sort of movie," would you be interested coming on board and playing that sort of role? Would you put aside that disappointment of not getting the part, and would it be a thumbs up for Dan Southworth?
I think it would be a much bigger win if I was offered an opportunity to appear as Kenshi,
Mhm.
just because I love that character. Now that I've played it, so you any role you get to play, you dive into, you make it the meal that it can be. You can't pine away and be upset about not getting the other roles. That can poison your whole experience in this career if you allow that kind of thing to happen. So even if somebody else plays Kenshi or some of the other characters that have become really popular in the other genres that I've done, I have to let that go if that's the case, right? You only rent the costume. You don't get to keep it.
And I suppose, lastly, Dan, I suppose that sort of a costume in terms of with the Kinshi costume, I suppose the blindfold that you were sort of wearing in terms of that was, I'm not going to ask how much did it impair your sort of vision, but in terms of the choreography, in terms of that, was it a sort of, was it almost like that you were rehearsing the moves blind?
Um, it was my vision was significantly impaired, but I could still see.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm sure it would have been something very difficult for somebody who hasn't studied martial arts,
Hmm.
because then
You're dealing with a whip and a sword, like, yeah.
yeah, when you're experiencing or performing a new movement that you've never done before, you need all of your senses about you to help you get through that sometimes. But if it's something that I've done martial arts for 40 plus years now, and I can do it with my eyes closed, and that helped. But I will say this: the wearing the blindfold was akin to uh, um, bushcraft, where you have to fashion together some out of bark or fabric a sort of protection for your eyes when you're out in the middle of the desert, where you're looking through these really thin slits. So basically, it just blocked out a lot of sun. And in that particular case, it happened to be kind of hot there in the park where we were filming, and the sun was pretty bright. So I remember it was a clearer day than normal because it was just after the rains. It rained a little bit, so the sky in Los Angeles tends to be pretty intense, the sun after the rain, because all the smog has been weighed down. And so we don't have that as a natural screen for the sunlight that comes through, and the sunlight is brighter than we're used to. Anybody who's traveled to Utah can attest to that in this country, because Utah is so clean, the air, that the sun hits you in the face with how bright it is. So wearing that blindfold actually kind of helped keep that sun from being so intense in my eyes.
I suppose, Dan, I suppose for the last 30 seconds, I suppose, Kenshi, it gave you that sort of chance to play that sort of mortal sort of fantasy character that we all sort of fantasize about growing up as young boys, to appear in this sort of sci-fi sort of reality sort of world. And was that something, I suppose, the good versus the bad, the other planets, the sort of evil versus good, was that something that you always wanted to aspire to play, a sort of what I say, an immortal sort of character, a character that was a different dimension as such? And did that give you a pleasure? And in terms of Kenshi, will it always hold a soft spot in your heart?
I think that one of the strongest appeals of the Mortal Kombat franchise is that the way the story is steeped in classic mythology. And what I mean by that is that it follows mythic storytelling in form for all of the characters, or each of the characters, good or bad, in that pantheon or genre. So mythic characters are absolutely a pleasure to play. I mean, there's a lot of deep cultural reference and psychology to latch on to. You know, for me, it felt as though I was playing some character in the very first Clash of Titans, which I saw when I was a kid. And that was a very memorable film to me. So in that sense, yes, absolutely a pleasure, and to play that character, and in a sense, fulfilling a childhood dream. There's a second part to your question that I missed.
Yeah, does the character still hold a soft spot in your heart in terms of the characters you play?
Of course, I had a great time playing that character, and of course it does. And you know, it would be wonderful if I got a chance to continue or get another round at him in a bigger venue for a longer stretch.
Yeah. On that note, Dan Southworth, it's been a pleasure talking to you on this episode of Mortal Kombat Franchise, the documentary. Dan Southworth, who played the character Kenshi in Mortal Kombat Legacy. And no doubt I have a feeling in the coming weeks, Dan, the producers will be on to you for that sort of cameo role in terms of Kenshi. And you'll be there in the movie premiere, yes, when the time comes around. Dan, pleasure, and take care.
Very, very kind of you. Thank you. Very much a pleasure.